Hi everyone, it's Dr. Rebreck here. We are on Friday, March 20th. Wanted to sort of touch base with everyone, see how everyone's doing. We still don't have the Google Classroom resolved. I've reached out to Myersdale's Tech as well as Miss Arnold's, waiting on a reply back. As soon as I hear from that, I will definitely let you guys know. I'm sort of stuck at this point because it seems to be throwing up an error message. I guess my other question to you is perhaps you guys could send me some type of email back. Do you guys have other options? Can we access Brightspace somehow? If you don't, could you guys get a hold of ACM IT department and see if you guys can get your login for that? That might be the easiest option for me. Otherwise, if we can't get into Google Classroom, and sort of see if we can get that resolved. The other option would be, can you guys Skype or can you guys Zoom? I don't know if either one of those options are there. So I'll send out an email asking for a reply back. You guys can just shoot that back to me and let me know if those are any possibilities there. Okay. All right. So we're going to jump into chapter 4. I have gotten some bonuses from individuals. If you have not gotten me that bonus, please just make sure you get that to me. I'll be more than happy to still count that. We definitely want to make sure that everybody's keeping busy. The other option is you guys should be working on your mass media projects. If you have questions, I've been getting emails. Give me a call, give me an email. I'll be more than happy to review those with you guys. You guys are doing really well in the midst of all this chaos, so I really appreciate that you guys are continuing to stay on top of your studies. I think it'll keep you guys busy, and we'll just keep trucking ahead. All right, so chapter 4. And like I said, you guys can incorporate this into your papers at any point in time. Chapter 4 is a really good chapter. We talk about social structures and social institutions a little bit more. We know that people are influenced by those norms and beliefs of their culture and society in which they live in. Think about that. Those influences take on a very personal and intimate level of how we begin to spread things throughout our societies. Just like with other things that can get spread, like traditions and, different pieces of things, so does somebody's belief systems. And it can affect a number of people as a result of that. Sociologists like to study that effect of social life on society when we use two approaches. Okay, those two approaches are macro sociology and micro sociology. And I think we used those terms a little bit before, but we're going to break it down a little bit more for you guys. Remember that macro sociology are those broad features of social structures, right? While micro sociology, much like it sounds, concentrates on those much smaller scale, face-to-face social interactions that occur. So functionalists and conflict theorists tend to use macro sociology approaches, while symbolic interactionists tend to look at those symbols and those micro sociology pieces of things. You know what I mean? Looking at those smaller interactions and what that means to individuals. So most sociologists tend to specialize in either approach, in one approach or the other. Okay, you're going to find that. But both approaches are extremely necessary for us to understand the complexities of social life, which we know. Think about it. Macro sociologists, a lot of times, where we're looking at functionalists and conflict theorists, can examine more expansive type of aspects of social nature. Why are things shifting in our society as far as productions? What else is going on there? Is it the economy? Is it political or social reasonings? What's interesting is that in the current nature of all this chaos is that they have been employing a lot of sociologists to figure out how fear and how certain things can move and shift social issues like the coronavirus and like these types of things and spread within that. And so we see that mass panic that can occur sometimes. And so sociologists have been sort of in there evaluating how we're handling the situation with the general public, because it can create, and we can see how things shift very quickly within that. So that's a really important topic for you guys to understand. All right, so remember, it's referring to society's framework, sort of looking at those various relationships between people in those groups, and that direct and set sort of limits on certain behaviors. Okay. All right, so the major components, and I think that that's important for us to look at, is that you guys understand what macro and micro sociology are. Okay. If you guys have questions about that, feel free to ask, but just remember that macro, we're looking at functionalists and conflict theorists, and micro, we're looking at symbolic interactionists. So understand how those two pieces sort of play out. Okay, so each yield a different perspective, but both are very much important for us to understanding a more stronger foundation of social life. Okay, all right, so let's talk a little bit more in detail about the macro perspective, okay, and look at it from the social structure. Social structure is defined as those pattern relationships between people that persist over time, okay? So those are our behaviors, our attitudes, are sort of determined by our location in the social structure. So components of social structure are culture, social class, social statuses, roles, groups, and institutions, okay? So think about that. Culture. It refers to a group's language, and we had learned about this in chapter 2, right? Their language, their beliefs, their values, their gestures, that's all part of somebody's culture. So it'll include even those material objects like we had talked about, used by a group, you know, the hairstyles, the clothing, the jewelry, the art, that type of stuff. That's all part of that materialistic piece. But that culture, it determines what kind of people we'll become. So that's really important for us to look at. So culture is something that sort of falls under that umbrella of macro, okay? Social class is something else that I think is important for anybody to evaluate and to look at something. When we're looking at these mass things, these mass factors that can impact somebody, social class is based on somebody's income, right? Their education and occupational prestige. So let me say that again, right? Social class is impacted by those three pieces, right? Income, and I think people just tend to stop there, like, oh, that's somebody's social class is based off their income. That's not the only thing, right? So social class is based on somebody's income. Education, which is important, right? That can affect somebody's social class. And finally, their occupational prestige. So what do I mean by occupational prestige? Think about the type of places that people work and their jobs and how that sort of compares in this big scheme of things. You know, are we going to view somebody that has maybe works in some type of field versus somebody that maybe has a very prestigious job? Do we view them the same in our social class realms, right? If somebody has a job that they are, you know, have that prestige, does that hold more weight versus somebody that's maybe not? You know what I mean? So I think that those are great examples. You know, and think about an example for me about that. What two job occupations can we look at, and do we view them the same way within our society? You know, it's interesting because in today's state of things right now, right? We talk about celebrities and we talk about those that make movies and actors and actresses and all that stuff, right? They held a very different occupational status, those in sports, right? But nowadays, all of a sudden, because of this pandemic, we now see a shift in whose status, occupational status means more. So now we see that the healthcare workers, those that are continuing those essential job duties, right? The grocery stores, the utility companies, you know, they are holding more weight now because of what's going on. Was that the case prior to this, you know? So social class is really important. We look at those large numbers of people and who have similar amounts of income and education and who work at those jobs. And and sort of make up those certain types of social class. Okay, so really important. You guys can look at that when you guys are talking about your movie or your TV show. You know, what social class do they make up? I think that's important. So in the same breath of it, we also have social status. Okay, our social status refers to the positions that an individual occupies. So what do I mean by that, right? A status may carry a great deal of prestige. Think about it. Are you a judge, an astronaut, right? That's going to hold a very high level of prestige in our society, right? Pro athlete. It could be, you know, a celebrity. It could be a director. It could be the CEO of a company, right? Occupational prestige, social status, it's gonna occupy it something very different, right? But or very little on the flip side, right? So it could be a gas station attendant, a cook in a fast food restaurant, right? That prestige may just not be there compared to somebody who has a judge or a lawyer occupation. And we're not saying that as a judging piece of it, we're saying that status in our society holds certain type of prestige as a result of that. Okay. Does that make sense? Hope everybody's with me here and we're all sort of staying here with this. Status set, okay, is another term that I want you guys to sort of become familiar with. A status set refers to the statuses or positions that an individual occupies. Think about it. You hold a very specific status set. You hold multiple statuses right now. You're a student, you're a daughter or son, maybe you're a grandchild to somebody, maybe you're the sister or brother of somebody, maybe you're an athlete, maybe you're the NJS member, maybe you are the valedictorian. Those are all statuses we occupy in our life, right? So when they're all in one piece and they're all explaining one person, that's considered a status set. Okay? Hope you guys are still with me. All right. The other thing that I want you guys to be understanding of when we talk about statuses is, yes, we can occupy certain status sets, but there's also something called an ascribed status. Okay? An ascribed status refers to positions an individual either inherits at birth or receives involuntarily in life. Okay, so what do I mean by that? What would be an example of that? Your race, your sex, and social class of your parents. You have no control of that. When you're born, it's just sort of something you inherit along the way, right? So those are all important for us to understand. We don't have control over ascribed statuses. Those are something in which we inherit at birth, okay, or along the way, okay? Now, on the flip side, there's something called an achieved status. An achieved status refers to positions in which you earn, okay, which makes sense. You accomplish them, or you involve at least some type of effort or activity on your part in order to reach that. So examples could be positive, like you are the president of your class. Maybe you're going to be the president of your college fraternity or whatever the case is. Maybe you're the captain of the team, right? These are all earned statuses within that. It could be you're an A student, right? Or maybe you have excellent attendance. Those are all statuses that we achieve. We've reached some type of goal as a result of that. You've put in some type of effort for the most part, right? However, with achieved statuses, they can also be somewhat negative. They don't necessarily have to be positive. You could achieve the status of a bank robber. You could be the best bank robber there is, right? A world-class thief, right? They can necessarily be negative in that context. You can achieve to be a criminal by intentions. Those are statuses that we achieve along the way. You know, maybe it's a high school dropout. Maybe it's, there's a lot of examples you guys can think of, as far as things that maybe are a little bit more negative in that context. Maybe it's a college dropout, maybe it's poor attendance, that you achieved truancy at that point in time. Okay, so status sets, ascribe statuses, achieve statuses. Okay, I hope we're all sort of making sense here as to where we are with this. I just want to make sure that we get through this one section of the macro sociology so that we're all on the same page. Okay, so each status provides sort of guidelines for how we're going to act and feel. Whether we mean to or not, those statuses guide us in our behaviors and our actions within that, right? So you might be the best daughter or son there is. Maybe you are really cleaning your room. Maybe you're really trying to step up your game as just being a good daughter or your son. You're constantly there to listen to mom or dad, or you're there to help them out, that type of thing. Or it could be, let's say you're a criminal and maybe you're making really poor choices, and you're making those decisions. You have some type of accountability in that, but that's going to guide your behavior and your actions as you move forward with that stuff. Okay. Status symbols, we talked about this slightly when we talked about symbolic interactionists a little bit, but status symbols are signs that people use or want others to recognize that they occupy a certain status. So think about that. If you want to say that you are doing quite well, right? You might have a really nice car. I don't know, that fancy car, or maybe it's certain type of clothing that you wear. It could be a certain type of wedding ring that you're wearing, or you're living in a really expensive home, right? Sometimes those statuses, we look at those materialistic pieces, and those status symbols provide guidance and cues as to that particular person's status in our society, whether we mean to or not, and sometimes they're not always accurate. But you will see that a lot of times that they occupy that, and people utilize those visual cues as ways to determine somebody's social status. Okay? Hope we're all staying together still on this. And finally, I want to talk about a master status. A master status is something being as simple as male or female, right? It cuts across all other statuses that an individual occupies. A master status can also be a disability for some individuals. I don't know if you guys know Stephen Hawking. He was the one that was on the Big Bang Theory a lot, that type of thing, right? Brilliant man. Created huge theories throughout the world of physics and science. Just absolutely brilliant. But people tend to automatically see that disability because he was in a wheelchair and impaired. We begin to look at that sometimes as that master status. It's hard for us to look at some of those other things first as far as the status, because that's the one that is so prominent within somebody's mind. Okay. So again, a master status sort of cuts across all other statuses that an individual occupies. Okay. In the same breath, we have something called a status inconsistency. Okay. A status inconsistency is a contradiction or a mismatch between statuses. So think about somebody that's in college and you have a 90-year-old person that maybe sits beside you in a college classroom. That would be a status inconsistency. It's not something that you necessarily within your mind associate a college student with somebody that's 90 years old, right? It happens, but it's called something of a status inconsistency as a result of that, right? The same thing could be in the reverse. Maybe there's somebody who's doing really well and they're like a genius and a prodigy, right? And they're like 10 or 11 taking high school classes, right? That's called a status inconsistency in that sense. And we can see it not only in the age component of it. A status inconsistency could be somebody who maybe it's that huge age gap for somebody in our society than which they're married to. Anything in which that status doesn't necessarily match up to what we think as a norm. Okay? And so it's sort of interesting when we look at this stuff as to how those statuses can impact somebody. Remember that our roles are the behaviors and obligations and privileges sort of attached to a status? You know, the individual occupies a status, but plays a role. Think about that. You are the son or daughter of somebody. You are occupying a role as a result of that. You know, so what kind of roles would you be sort of playing? You know, does that mean as a good son or daughter that you're cleaning your room, you're doing your homework, you're helping mom and dad out, you're, you know, a good friend to them, you know, you talk to them, you communicate, you know, what does that look like? Roles are an essential part of our culture because they sort of lay out what's expected of people, right? If you decide you want to become a teacher, what does that role look like? What are those things that you're supposed to be doing, and how does that make you a better teacher versus somebody that, you know, those statuses and what you're supposed to be doing, right? So as an individual performs those roles sometimes can mesh together to form a society, right? So think about that. Each one of our roles plays a bigger part in the macro scheme of things in our society. You know, we know that those judges and astronauts and garbage collectors and cooks in our society all play a role in the larger scheme of things. And so while everybody has a status that they occupy, and while they play a role in that, that all is important to how we work day in and day out. And think about that. A group of people who consciously, regularly interact with one another and typically share similar values and norms and expectations. We have groups all the time. So when we belong to a group, we sort of give up at least some type of control to other individuals over our lives. So that control can sort of depend on the relationships and the amounts of interactions that we have within that group. So look at your movie or your TV show too. Are there groups that exist? You know, are they, I don't know, doing a heist? Do you know what I mean? What is that group of individuals like? And how is that impacting their behaviors? Is there somebody sort of in control of the group as a whole? You know, that's sort of dictating everybody's sort of actions within it. Those are all important things for us to look at as a society. You know, and how does that play a part into that larger scheme of things and those individual interactions that we have as a society? All right, I'm going to end there because, one, I don't know if it's very easy for me to upload these videos. It takes a little bit, so I do apologize. If you guys need anything, call or email me. I'm going to try to reach out to them again and try to get this resolved. If not, do me a favor, really try to get on Brightspace if possible, and that way I can post this stuff there too, just as a backup option for us, so we can still interact with one another. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody is staying safe. You know, continue to work on your writing assignment for me. Please take care of yourself. I'm thinking about each one of you, and hopefully we can get some interaction going on here soon. All right, so chapter 4, we're still running into this. Feel free to utilize any of this information as you guys are working on your projects, though, okay? All right, take care, guys, and have a good day.